They were just three children, silent, hungry, and hiding behind sacks of flour in a grocery store storage room. He was just a tired single dad working the night shift to survive his own quiet grief. They weren't supposed to meet. He wasn't supposed to take them home. But that night, a simple act of kindness changed everything. What began as one night of shelter turned into a journey none of them could have imagined. And by the time the truth came to light, it was already too late to walk away. If you believe in the power of second chances, the strength of found family and stories that warm your heart, long after they end, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. Now let's begin. A single dad took in three abandoned siblings, not knowing they'd rewrite the meaning of family. The fluorescent lights in the back storage room buzzed overhead, casting a cold white glare on the concrete floor. It was nearly 10 p.m., and the store was supposed to be closed locked tight. But Michael Gray knew something was off the moment he heard the faint shuffle of feet, too light for a grown adult, too urgent to be a mistake. He moved quietly through the aisle of bulk supplies, his flashlight cutting a narrow path through the darkness. He was a big man, rough around the edges from years under hoods and lifting boxes, but tonight his footsteps were careful, almost gentle. And then he saw them. Three figures crouched behind a stack of flour sacks. A girl older, maybe 11, froze mid-motion, a loaf of bread clutched tight in her hands. Behind her, a boy barely taller than her shoulder stood stiff as a statue, and nestled between them, a toddler in an oversized hoodie sucked her thumb, her wide eyes shining with fear. Michael's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, no one moved. The flashlight beam hovered over the girl's face. She didn't flinch. Her jaw was set, her eyes steady, too steady for a child. "We're not stealing," she said, voice trembling but defiant. "We're hungry." Michael lowered the light. He should have radioed security, should have called the police. That was protocol. But something about the girl's voice, about the way she pulled the toddler behind her, shielding her like a lion cub, made him hesitate. "What are your names?" he asked, quieter than he expected. The girl hesitated, then spoke. "I'm Lena. That's Caleb. She's Maisie. And where are your parents?" Lena glanced at the floor. Gone. Michael looked at the bread in her hands, the grime on their clothes, the raw red patches on their skin from cold and rough sleep. His throat tightened. Something in him, some instinct he hadn't felt in years, flickered alive. "You can't stay here," he said slowly. "But, come on," Lena's eyes widened. "You're not calling the cops." "I said, come on," he repeated, already turning away. "Before someone else does." The old Ford truck rumbled to life in the parking lot. Michael turned the heater all the way up. The kids sat stiffly in the back seat, Lena pressed against the door. Caleb watching the road signs like they might disappear, and Maisie curled up on Lena's lap, snoring softly. His house sat 2 miles down a gravel road that barely qualified as paved. The porch light flickered when he unlocked the door. "Make yourselves comfortable," he muttered, flipping the switch to the kitchen. "I'll fix something warm." He didn't expect them to follow, but they did, quiet as ghosts standing awkwardly in the corner while he reheated leftover chili. Michael set 3 mismatched bowls on the table. Caleb didn't touch his spoon. Maisie tried to eat with her fingers. Lena said thank you with the same tone someone might use for a battlefield truce. "You can stay the night," Michael said, finally breaking the silence. "Tomorrow, we'll figure it out." The kids said nothing. But when Michael came back from getting extra blankets, they were still there. Lena had washed Maisie's face with a paper towel. Caleb had started eating. That night he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the echo of Lena's voice looping in his head. "We're not stealing. We're hungry." And for the first time in 5 years, he couldn't fall asleep. It rained the next morning, Oregon rain. Cold, constant, the kind that soaked into your bones. Michael woke to the smell of wet socks and the sound of soft footsteps in his kitchen. Lena was trying to toast a piece of bread using a frying pan. Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, drawing something in the condensation on the window. Maisie was humming tunelessly, banging a spoon on the table. "You shouldn't be up yet," Michael said, clearing his throat. Lena turned startled but stood her ground. "We were hungry." He nodded once and opened the fridge. "You like scrambled eggs," Maisie cheered. Caleb said nothing, but he nodded. Lena, after a long pause, added, "Thank you." Again. It was mid-breakfast when Michael finally asked, "Where were you staying?" before Lena hesitated. Caleb looked up from his plate. A shelter. In Portland. But they took Mom. Said she wasn't fit anymore. She was sick. Then they tried to split us up. Michael frowned. How long have you been out here? Since they took her, she said. We ran. From the system. From foster care. From help. Or maybe from something worse. Michael stared at his coffee for a long time before speaking. I have to call someone. Social services. I can't keep you here. Not without knowing if you call them. Lena said suddenly fierce, they'll take us away. We'll be put in different homes. I promised Maisie I'd keep us together. Michael opened his mouth to respond but stopped. He looked at Caleb, who hadn't made a sound all morning. At Maisie, who now clutched a crayon like a sword. At Lena, eyes burning with something too sharp for her age. He thought of a hospital room 5 years ago, the machines, the tubes, the stillness after his son took his last breath. He still kept the little wooden toy truck his boy had carved. It sat on the mantel untouched, a memory fossilized. Lena's voice brought him back. If we can just stay a few days, she whispered, I'll figure out what to do next. I promise. Michael looked at her and saw not a thief, not a runaway, not even a child. He saw a survivor, and survivors deserved more than an empty promise from a broken man. He stood, picked up the phone, and slowly, without dialing, set it back down. All right, he said. 3 days. Lena exhaled. Caleb looked up. Maisie beamed. Michael took another sip of coffee, staring into the rain. 3 days, he told himself. He didn't know yet that those 3 days would change everything. The next few hours passed like something out of a dream. Michael wasn't sure he'd had time to process. After breakfast, the kids napped on the old couch in the living room, curled together like a pack of stray animals, finding warmth for the first time. Lena had stayed up most of the night, her body coiled as if on guard, even in sleep, while Caleb stirred at the sound of every creak. Only Maisie had given in to the deep, trusting sleep of the truly young. Michael watched them from the hallway, hands deep in his jacket pockets, unsure what to do with the silence that had suddenly settled over the house. The last time there'd been this much noise in his home, his son was still alive. He stepped outside for air. The porch was slick with rain, the gravel drive littered with pine needles. He stood there for a long time, the cold cutting through his flannel, letting the wind rake through memories he hadn't invited. 3 days, he'd said, but even he didn't believe it. That afternoon, he pulled together a lunch of tomato soup and grilled cheese. Nothing fancy, but the kids reacted like he'd set down a Thanksgiving feast. Maisie clapped. Caleb gave a rare sideways grin. Lena stared at the plate before whispering, Are you sure we can eat all of it? All of it, Michael said, sitting down across from them. And seconds if you want. The table creaked under the weight of 4 mismatched bowls, the first time it had seen that many since before the accident. They ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind. Lena made sure her siblings had enough, even offering her own half sandwich to Caleb when he paused too long between bites. Michael watched her with a quiet sort of awe. She reminded him of someone. When the plates were cleared, he leaned back in his chair and finally asked, Do you want to tell me more about your mom? Lena tensed. Caleb froze. Michael held up his hand. You don't have to. I'm not pressing. If you ever feel like it, I'm here. For a long while, Lena said nothing. Then she pushed her empty bowl forward and stared at her reflection in the spoon. She wasn't always like that, she said softly. She used to sing, all the time. Old songs from the radio. She knew how to make pancakes shaped like animals. Her voice cracked. But then she started forgetting things. Where she put our shoes, whether she fed Maisie. One day she left Caleb at the park. Just forgot he was there. Michael's jaw tightened. We tried to help, Lena continued, eyes glassy. But they said she was unfit. Put her somewhere. We don't know where. What about your father? She shook her head. He left before Maisie was born. We never met him. Michael exhaled slowly. Every instinct told him to pick up the phone and call Child Protective Services. That's what the system was for, right? But another part of him, deeper and harder to ignore, screamed something else. Not yet. Not them. Not these kids. Caleb slid a drawing across the table, 3 stick figures holding hands under a crooked roof with a 4th off to the side. Michael recognized himself instantly standing under a rain cloud. The childlike bluntness hit him harder than expected. That me? He asked with a faint smile. Caleb nodded. Michael tapped the fourth figure. Why the rain? The boy hesitated, then pointed toward the window. Outside, the sky was still gray. Because you're still alone, his silence seemed to say. After lunch, Michael went to the garage. It was time to think. The old workbench was littered with tools, rusted bolts, and a half-disassembled carburetor from a lawnmower he'd promised to fix 6 months ago. The hum of solitude usually calmed him, but today the silence felt hollow. He looked up at the small wooden truck on the shelf above, his son's last project. It had been 5 years, but the pain still came, in waves, sharp, cold, and without warning. 3 kids in your kitchen, Mike, he told himself. What are you even doing? He wiped his hands and headed back inside. That evening, he found Lena folding a pile of blankets on the couch. Maisie sat nearby, humming to a stuffed animal that had seen better days. Caleb was sorting crayons into neat rows. You don't have to clean, Michael said. We don't want to be a burden, Lena replied quickly. Too quickly. You're not. She looked up at him, eyes guarded. We always are. People say it nice at first. Then they look at you like you're too loud, too messy, too much. You can see it in their faces. Michael pulled out a chair and sat down. You ever stay in one place long? Lena shook her head. Couple nights, sometimes a week. Then someone changes their mind. That what you think I'll do? She hesitated. I don't know what to think. Michael didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked to the cabinet and pulled down 4 bowls. This time he ladled out chili from a pot he'd made 2 days ago. Still good, still warm. He set them down and said, It's not much, but I believe meals should always be shared at a table. Lena sat first, then Caleb. Maisie climbed onto a chair with a giggle. As they ate, Michael told them about his job at the grocery store, his old motorcycle, and how he once built a go-kart from a shopping cart and a leaf blower. The kids laughed, real unguarded laughter that filled the kitchen like light pouring in after a storm. After the dishes were done, Lena lingered. Thank you, she said again, for everything. You don't have to thank me for feeding kids who are hungry, Michael said. That's just human decency. Lena tilted her head. It's more than that. Most people don't even look at us. You see us. Michael met her gaze. I do. She paused. 3 days. He smiled just barely. Let's see how tomorrow goes. As Lena walked away, Michael leaned back in his chair, the room around him feeling different, warmer, lived in. He didn't know where this road would lead. He didn't even know if it was a road at all. But tonight there were 3 plates at his table, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was eating alone. Michael stood at the kitchen sink, drying his hands on a dish towel as the sun crept slowly over the tree line. The morning light filtered through the blinds, striping the walls in quiet gold. It was Sunday, his only day off, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a hollow stretch of silence he'd need to kill with car repair videos and half-hearted yard work. He glanced into the living room. Lena was helping Maisie button a sweater that was clearly 2 sizes too small. Caleb sat on the floor beside them, flipping through an old National Geographic magazine with a torn cover. A family improvised, but intact. Michael cleared his throat. I've got some errands in town. Thought we'd head over, pick up groceries, maybe swing by the hardware store. Sound good, Lena looked up sharply. All of us. Yeah, he said with a shrug. I figure it's time you picked your own cereal, Maisie squealed. Caleb stood quickly as if worried the offer might evaporate if he moved too slow. Lena hesitated. Won't people ask questions? Probably. He nodded. But you're with me. That's all they need to know. The trip into town was uneventful until they reached the grocery store. As Michael wheeled the cart past the frozen foods aisle, he spotted a familiar face at the end cap display, Helen Walker, a caseworker from the Department of Human Services. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and quick-witted, the type who could spot a lie before you even opened your mouth. He'd met her a few times through neighborhood events. She was good at her job, and that was the problem. He tried to veer away unnoticed, but it was too late. Michael, Helen called out, stepping forward. He forced a smile. Helen. Morning? Her eyes drifted to the kids. I didn't know you had company. He stiffened slightly. They're friends of the family. Helen knelt a bit, smiling warmly at Maisie. What's your name, sweetheart? Maisie pressed into Lena's side, silent. Lena responded, voice even. Maisie, she's shy. Helen's gaze sharpened. They staying with you long, Michael bristled. Just a few days, their situation's complicated. Helen stood. I'd like to talk to you sometime. Soon. Michael nodded. Sure, anytime. But his stomach was a knot of ice. That night after the kids had gone to bed, Michael sat at the kitchen table with a laptop he hadn't opened in weeks. He pulled up the state's foster care database, a public portal limited but useful. He searched Lena age range 10 to 12 female. Then Caleb male 6 to 8, Maisie female 2 to 4. Nothing. No profiles, no alerts, no active searches. He frowned. Next he called a friend Travis, a mechanic who used to be married to a paralegal. Travis owed him more than a few favors. I need someone who can help me dig through case files, Michael said. Kids. Foster system. I think something's off. Off how Travis asked. They don't exist. Not in the system. No missing persons report. No foster placement. But they told me their mother was taken to a state facility. Travis was quiet. You sure you want to get involved in this? I already am. 2 days later, a manila envelope arrived at his porch with no return address. Inside was a single printout, a redacted report from DHS marked confidential. At the top, Elizabeth Jane Mercer, age 38. Diagnosis is schizoaffective disorder. Custody of 3 minors terminated due to mental instability. No kinship placement. Children transferred to temporary care, but notes on their placement had been blacked out by marker. Michael stared at the page until the words blurred. Elizabeth Mercer. That name, it rang something in his memory. He opened a box from the attic, one he hadn't touched in years. Inside were photos, notes, old love letters, even a necklace shaped like a tiny oak leaf. He picked up a photo, his younger self smiling beside a woman with laughing eyes and wild curly hair. Her name was Ellie Mercer. Ellie, the girl he'd met at 19. The woman who'd left abruptly one summer, never returning his calls, leaving behind only a scrawled note, I can't explain. I'm not well. Please forgive me. And now, decades later, her children were sleeping under his roof. Lena, Caleb, Maisie. His hands trembled as he flipped the photo over. In Ellie's handwriting, summer 2009, Mid-Ashland Trail Camp. A lump formed in his throat. He grabbed the flashlight and returned to the attic. After digging through a second box, he found what he hadn't realized: he'd kept a faded camp brochure from that same summer. On the back, scrawled in familiar script, was a name and a date, Michael Gray, plus Ellie Mercer. July 12, 2009. Forever if we're lucky. He sat back stunned. Lena. She wasn't just some stranger's child. She was his. Later that night, Michael sat in the hallway back against the wall, heart racing in his chest. From the open door to the living room, he could hear Lena whispering to Caleb. You have to be careful at school. Don't tell them where we're staying. Don't tell them about Mike. People get suspicious. Caleb murmured something in return, too soft to hear. Just be smart, she said. We can't get split up. Not again. Michael walked back to his bedroom and closed the door softly behind him. His mind spiraled. If Lena really was his daughter, what did that mean, legally, emotionally? And more importantly, did she know, had Ellie ever told her? He wasn't sure what terrified him more, that she didn't know, or that she did and hadn't said a word. He turned off the light and lay in the dark, the air thick with questions he couldn't yet answer. But one thing was already certain. This wasn't just a 3-day favor anymore. This was something else, something permanent, something his. And he had no idea how to protect it. The next morning, the house stirred before sunrise. Michael stood in the hallway just outside the kids' shared room. He could hear Lena's quiet commands, gentle but firm, as she helped Maisie get dressed and reminded Caleb to double-check his socks. Her voice had that strange maturity that didn't belong to an 11-year-old. It was the voice of someone who had been forced to parent long before she ever had a chance to be a child. Michael leaned against the doorframe, watching for a moment too long. Lena noticed and gave him a tight, guarded smile. We're almost ready, she said. I know, he said quietly. You always are. The school was a modest brick building tucked between 2 rusting baseball fields and a weather-worn church. Michael had arranged for temporary enrollment, with the help of a sympathetic clerk who agreed to list them as displaced kin. It wasn't legally airtight, but it bought them time. He'd expected more resistance, but small towns had a way of looking the other way when a familiar face vouched for something, or someone. In the parking lot, Caleb wouldn't let go of his hand. "You'll pick us up?" the boy asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Michael said. "Right here, same spot." Caleb nodded solemnly, then joined his sister. Lena took Maisie's hand, gave Michael a long glance, half challenge, half plea, and disappeared into the school building. Michael watched them walk away, a strange ache blooming in his chest. He hadn't expected it to hurt so much. Back home, he found himself wandering. He passed the living room where crayons still littered the coffee table, the kitchen where 3 juice glasses stood like silent sentinels, and then inevitably the door at the end of the hall, his son's room. He hadn't touched it since that winter 5 years ago, when life stopped like a record needle scratching off the vinyl. Slowly, as if breaking a sacred seal, he turned the knob and stepped inside. The air was dry and still. Dust floated in sunbeams slanting through the closed blinds. The twin bed was perfectly made, the shelves still lined with model cars, sports trophies, and a stack of books about space. On the nightstand sat a framed photo, Michael and a boy no older than 10, grinning in front of a makeshift treehouse. James, his boy, gone in less than 3 weeks from diagnosis to death, an aggressive heart infection the doctors hadn't seen coming. One day he was chasing squirrels in the yard, the next he couldn't breathe. Michael had held his hand through it all, through the beeping monitors and the terrible silence that came afterward. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. He picked up the photo, brushed a speck of dust off the glass. His thumb lingered on James's face. "I wasn't ready for you to go," he whispered. "Still not." He stayed there a long time, unmoving. Not until the sound of gravel shifting outside broke the stillness. Helen Walker stood on the porch, clipboard in hand, professional smile, affixed like armor. Michael opened the door with a nod. "I thought you might stop by," he said. She stepped inside cautiously. "I figured we could talk, off the record." He gestured toward the kitchen. "Coffee only, if it's strong." They sat across from each other, steam rising between them. Helen got to the point. "Michael, I reviewed our database. There's no active file on any of the kids. No formal placement, no missing persons, no court records." "That's not just unusual, it's dangerous." "I know," he said quietly. "Then you also know this can't last. I'm not trying to play the villain here, but if someone finds out you've been harboring them without formal guardianship, they're not criminals, Helen. They're children. Children who've been failed by every adult before they got to me." Helen leaned back. "And what if you fail them too?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Do you think I don't ask myself that every hour?" he said, voice low but fierce. "I wake up wondering if this is a mistake, if I'm dragging them into another disaster. But when Caleb flinches every time someone raises their voice, when Lena keeps rehearsing escape plans in her sleep, how am I supposed to just call someone and hand them back to the system?" Helen was silent. Michael took a breath. "And there's more. I think Lena might be my daughter." Helen's eyes widened. "Excuse me, I knew her mother. Ellie Mercer. We were together years ago. She disappeared. Now it adds up." Helen frowned. "Have you talked to Lena about it?" "No," he said. "I don't want to throw a truth at her she's not ready for. She's just starting to trust me." Helen studied him for a long moment. "You're not the man I expected when I started digging." "Who did you expect?" She gave a small smile. "Another middle-aged burnout trying to play savior. But I see it now. You're not trying to save them. You're trying to heal something in yourself." Michael looked down into his coffee. "Maybe both." Helen stood. "I can't promise I can stop this from going up the chain, but I'll buy you time. A few weeks. After that, you'll need a real lawyer." He rose with her. "Thank you." As she reached the door, she turned. "They're lucky. All 3 of them." "I'm the lucky one," he said. "I just didn't realize it until now." That evening, the kids burst through the door with stories from school. Maisie had learned the alphabet song. Caleb had built a Lego tower taller than a classmate. Lena, though cautious, had asked for a library card. Michael listened to each story like a man starving for sound. He cooked spaghetti while Maisie danced to an invisible tune, and Caleb showed him a glitter-glued art project. Lena helped set the table, glancing at him with something just a bit softer than before. When dinner was over and the kids went to bed, Michael stood in the hallway again. This time he didn't avoid James's room. He stepped inside, turned on the light, and walked to the desk. He took the photo frame and placed it in the living room right beside the new drawing Caleb had made. 3 stick figures under a roof, and now a 4th. Michael smiled. The room no longer echoed, it breathed. Michael hadn't planned on answering the door. It was Saturday, his one sacred day to sleep past 6. But the knocking was persistent, sharp, and urgent in a way that made him pull on his jacket and shuffle down the hall before the kids could wake up. He opened the door to find a man in a pressed gray suit standing on the porch, a thin briefcase in one hand and a tight professional smile on his face. "Mr. Gray," the man asked. Michael's jaw tensed. "That's me, Paul Hastings. I represent the Eastwood family in Washington County. I believe you're currently housing 3 minors, one of whom, Lena, is being considered for private foster placement." Michael blinked. "I'm sorry." What Paul handed him a folder. The Eastwoods are a licensed foster family. High standing. They saw Lena's photo during a routine DHS outreach review and expressed interest in a direct placement. "Photo," Michael repeated. "Who gave them her photo?" "It was submitted as part of a preliminary case file." Paul tapped the folder. "They've offered to provide a stable environment, excellent education, private counseling. Their home is well within the top percentile of number." Paul paused. "I don't think you understand." Michael stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "No, she's not going anywhere. She's not your child, Mr. Gray," Paul said coolly. "There's no legal guardianship filed, no adoption paperwork. At the moment, you're a temporary shelter at best." The words struck like cold water to the face. Michael clenched his fists. "Lena's not some catalog item for wealthy couples to pluck off a list," he said. "She's not leaving her brother and sister. Not now. Not ever." Paul raised an eyebrow. "You don't have a say in that. Not unless you file for formal custody." Michael glanced past the man's shoulder where Lena had appeared in the hallway, pale and rigid, her hands balled into tight fists. "I'll see you in court then," Michael said. That afternoon, the house was quieter than usual. Lena sat on the porch swing, staring out across the gravel drive. Michael brought her a mug of hot cocoa the way he used to for James when nightmares woke him. She didn't take it at first. "Do you think I'm better off somewhere else?" she asked, not looking at him. Michael sat beside her. "What I think doesn't matter if you're not safe. And splitting you from your siblings. That's not safety." "I heard what the man said," she whispered. "The Eastwoods. They sound like good people. Like they have everything." Michael exhaled slowly. "They probably are. But they don't have you. Not all of you. They don't have Caleb's quiet loyalty, or Maisie's songs about broccoli and dinosaurs, or the way you take care of them like someone twice your age." She was quiet a long moment. "Why would they want me?" "You're brave," he said. "You're smart. And people like that? They want to collect good things. But that's just it. You're not something to collect." Lena's voice cracked. "They'll take me anyway, won't they? Not if I can help it." She finally looked at him. "Why do you care so much?" Michael hesitated. He could say what he should about decency, about responsibility, but the truth was bigger than that. Deeper, more fragile. "Because once I lost a child," he said, voice barely above the wind. "And I swore if I ever had the chance to protect another one, I'd never walk away." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She didn't have to. That night after the kids had gone to sleep, Michael dialed Helen Walker. "I need your help," he said. "They're trying to separate them. Take Lena." There was a pause, then Helen sighed. "I was afraid something like this might happen. That lawyer Hastings, he's ambitious. Looks good on paper to offer a merit-based placement. I've seen it before. So how do we stop it?" "There's a hearing in a week," she said. "They'll argue Lena deserves a superior opportunity. You'll need representation." "I can't afford an attorney," Michael admitted. "I know someone who might take the case pro bono. Her name's Angela Bennett, former foster child, now an attorney. She takes the cases others won't. Send me her number. And Mike, yeah, she'll ask you why you're doing this, why you're risking everything." Michael looked out the window where the moonlight framed 3 sleeping children on the living room floor. I don't think I had a choice, he said. They showed up, and somehow they brought me back to life. The next morning, Michael met Angela Bennett in a quiet diner off the interstate. She was in her late 30s, wore no makeup, and kept her curly hair tied back in a practical knot. She ordered coffee black and asked no small talk questions. You want custody, she said. I want to keep them together. DHS won't make that easy. I know. Angela leaned forward. You do realize this will mean an investigation into your finances, your criminal record, your home life. I've got nothing to hide. She studied him. That might be true. But what about your grief? Michael flinched. Angela tapped her fingers on the table. I've read your history, your son, your wife, the job you gave up after the funeral. Most men don't recover from that. I didn't, he admitted. Not fully. But these kids, they've given me a reason to try again. Angela nodded slowly. I'll take the case, she said. But I won't just be defending them, I'll be defending you. Michael swallowed hard. Then I better be worth defending. Back at the house, the kids had drawn a new picture. This time there were 4 figures under the roof. One had a bushy mustache. Another was holding a wrench. The words scrawled above them in crooked crayon read, Our Real Home. Michael stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. This wasn't just about Lena anymore. It was about all 3 of them. And maybe it was about him too. The storm rolled in without warning, one of those fast-moving Oregon squalls that swept down from the mountains, washing everything in silver and thunder. Rain hammered the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside, the lights flickered, once then steadied. Michael was upstairs digging through the attic with a flashlight clamped between his teeth and 1,000 questions rattling inside him like loose bolts in a toolbox. It had started as a search for old tax returns. Angela had requested documents to prove his financial history for the custody petition, but somewhere between a dusty box of auto repair manuals and a broken toaster, he found a wooden chest sealed with 2 tarnished brass latches. He hesitated. The chest hadn't been opened in years. Inside were the remnants of another life, his life with Ellie. Michael sat cross-legged on the attic floor, flashlight aimed downward as he sifted through faded photos, love letters folded 100 times in the scent of time and grief. His hands were shaking. At the bottom of the chest was a small envelope brittle with age. He unfolded it carefully and out slid a photograph. There she was, Ellie Mercer, smiling into the camera, freckles bright against summer-tan skin. She wore a white cotton dress and no shoes, her curls wild from the wind. Standing beside her, arm wrapped loosely around her waist, was a younger Michael. They were maybe 20 and in love in the way only the young can be, recklessly, impossibly, completely. He turned the photo over, scrawled in Ellie's handwriting, Mint Ashland Trail Camp, July 12, 2009. We'll find her forever one way or another. Michael closed his eyes. He remembered that trip. He remembered the way she laughed when they got caught in a downpour and had to huddle under the same threadbare tarp. He remembered the way she whispered she was late, not late for dinner, but late. He remembered the panic, then the joy. And he remembered the note she left only weeks later. I'm not well. I'm scared. Please don't look for me. And now there was Lena, 11 years old. Smart, brave, sharp-chinned. My God, he thought. She's mine. That evening, Lena sat alone at the kitchen table, thumbing through one of Michael's old cookbooks. She wasn't reading, not really. Her eyes were distant, face pale. Caleb had a nightmare last night, she said as Michael walked in. He won't talk about it. Michael poured 2 mugs of tea and sat across from her. It'll take time. He's been through a lot. So have we all. He nodded, then set the photograph on the table between them. Lena looked down at it. Her breath caught. Is that yes? Michael said softly. That's me. And your mother. Lena's eyes welled, but she didn't cry. You knew her. I loved her. Once. A long time ago. She ran a finger over the image, lips pressed together. She never told me about you. She said she had to leave because she was broken. Michael's throat tightened. She was sick, Lena. But she wasn't broken. And she never stopped loving you. That much I know. Lena sat very still. Are you my father? The question hung in the air like smoke. I think I am, he said. I haven't done a test, but the dates match. The place. The look in your eyes. I don't need a test to know what I already feel. Lena's face crumpled, not in fear, not in anger, but something else, relief. Pure, unfiltered, world-collapsing relief. And then the tears came. Michael reached across the table and took her hand firm and steady. I didn't know, she whispered. I thought maybe, but I didn't want to hope. I'm sorry I wasn't there, he said. I would have moved heaven to find you if I'd known. You found me now. They sat in silence, fingers still entwined. Outside, the rain softened to a hush. A new chapter had begun quietly, completely. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Michael sat by the fireplace with a pen and a yellow legal pad. Angela had advised him to write a declaration, a personal letter to the judge explaining why he wanted custody, what the children meant to him. He stared at the blank page for a long time. Then he wrote, "To whom it may concern, my name is Michael Gray. I'm not a perfect man. I've made mistakes. I've lost people. But I have never, not once, walked away from someone who needed me. These children, Lena, Caleb, and Maisie, came into my life through the back door of fate. I didn't go looking for them. They showed up, hungry, scared, brave. I didn't choose them, but I stayed, and now I do choose them. Every day, every morning, every bedtime story, and every bandaged knee. I choose them when they cry, when they fight, when they fall asleep on the couch mid-movie. I choose them when I remember the son I lost and I realize I have been given one more chance to do something that matters. If family's measured by paperwork and blood, then maybe I fail. But if it's measured by love, consistency, and sacrifice, then I'm already their father. Let me keep them. Let me raise them. Let me give them the kind of life they deserve. Not perfect, but safe, steady, whole. With hope, Michael Gray." When he finished, Michael folded the paper with care and slid it into an envelope. He didn't know what the judge would see in those words, but he knew what he saw in them. Truth, love, redemption, and something else too. A future. Not just for them, for all of them. The courthouse stood at the edge of downtown, an old red brick building with ivy snaking up its columns, and a clock tower that hadn't worked properly in years. The kind of place where justice moved at a small-town pace just fast enough to pretend it hadn't stalled. Michael parked his truck across the street, staring up at the worn facade as if it were a mountain he hadn't trained to climb. Lena sat in the passenger seat, unusually quiet. Caleb and Maisie had stayed home with Helen, who'd insisted on babysitting, while Michael attended the pre-hearing consultation. Lena had insisted on coming. She said it was about her future. She deserved to hear every word. She was right. Angela Bennett met them on the steps. She wore a navy suit and carried a leather satchel under one arm. Her eyes were alert, but her voice was calm. "You ready for this?" she asked. Michael exhaled. "I don't think anyone's ever ready for a fight about their family." Angela nodded. "Then it's a good thing you're not just anyone." They passed through security, their footsteps echoing against the marble floors. The waiting area outside the judge's chambers was lined with wooden benches and fading portraits of stern-faced men who had once interpreted justice from the same room they were now headed toward. Michael adjusted his collar. Lena sat beside him, staring at her hands. Angela checked her watch. "Judge Wallace is methodical but fair. He won't be swayed by sentiment alone, so we're leading with evidence. Stability, responsibility. Your personal statement will be attached to the formal petition." Michael nodded. "You read it. I read it twice," Angela said. "It doesn't read like something written by a mechanic. It reads like something written by a father." Lena looked up at that. Before Michael could speak, the door opened. "Gray Bennett," a clerk called. Angela stood smoothing her jacket. "It's just procedural today. The real hearing is next week, but the Eastwoods filed an expedited request for provisional custody of Lena. That's why we're here to stop it." Michael's stomach turned to stone. He didn't know it would be today. He exchanged a quick glance with Lena. She gave a small nod. "We've got this," she whispered. Inside the chamber was more intimate than Michael expected. No grand jury box, just the judge at a raised bench, a single court reporter, and 3 folding chairs arranged in a semicircle. Across from them sat Paul Hastings, the Eastwoods attorney, in another immaculate suit, smugness, practically tailored into the seams. Judge Wallace adjusted his glasses. "This is a preliminary matter. We're reviewing a motion for temporary placement of minor Lena Mercer into the home of John and Marianne Eastwood, pending a full custody hearing." Ms. Bennett, your response? Angela stood. Your Honor, we object to the motion on the grounds that removing Lena from her current placement would be traumatic, disruptive, and most importantly, unnecessary. She is safe, stable, and in the care of a man who may very well be her biological father. We ask that the court maintain status quo until a full review can be conducted. Paul rose smoothly. Your Honor, the Eastwoods have been vetted, licensed, and have provided a detailed care plan. Mr. Gray has no legal standing, no custody order, no proof of paternity. The child's welfare must come first. Judge Wallace turned to Michael. Mr. Gray, do you wish to say anything? Michael stood slowly. His palms were sweating. I don't have a law degree, he began, voice a little shaky. I don't have money or a big house. But I've got a kitchen where she eats breakfast, a porch where she laughs, and 2 other kids who call her sister like it's the only truth they know. If you take her away now, you're not just taking her, you're breaking 3 lives at once. The courtroom went silent. Then unexpectedly, Lena stood up. Your Honor, she said, her voice trembling. Can I speak? The judge glanced at the attorneys, then nodded. Lena walked forward, shoulders squared, chin high. I know what people say when they look at us, that we're just kids, that we don't know what's best for us. But I've lived in shelters. I've had people look through me like I'm furniture. Mike doesn't do that. He sees us. She paused, her voice tightening. Do you know how many nights I used to fall asleep wondering if tomorrow we'd still be together? That fear, it never goes away. But with Mike, for the first time, it got quieter. Michael's throat closed. Angela blinked rapidly, then turned to the judge. Your Honor, we ask for the court's compassion, not just its procedure. The judge nodded slowly. I'm not here to measure hearts, he said, but I am here to preserve the well-being of a child. I'll deny the expedited motion. Miss Mercer will remain with Mr. Gray until the formal custody hearing next week. Michael exhaled like he hadn't taken a breath in 10 minutes. Lena turned to look at him, her eyes wide with cautious hope. Paul Hastings didn't look pleased. Court is adjourned, Judge Wallace said, rising. Outside, the sky had cleared. A break in the storm. Michael and Lena walked down the courthouse steps in silence. At the bottom, Angela turned to them with a rare, relaxed smile. You both did good, she said. But the real battle's next week, and they'll come in swinging. I've got a few swings left in me, Michael said. Just tell me what we need. Angela handed him a new folder. Witnesses, letters of support, maybe even DNA results if you want to push the paternity angle. The more we show this isn't just emotional, the better. Lena tugged on Michael's sleeve as Angela walked ahead. You didn't have to let me speak, she said. Michael crouched a little so they were eye to eye. You didn't need permission. That was your truth. And you said it better than I ever could. She smiled then, just a little. The kind of smile that didn't come easy but meant everything, when it did. As they walked to the truck, Lena reached out and took his hand. Not out of fear, not out of habit, but choice. And for Michael, that meant more than any ruling ever could. The sky over the valley cracked open just before dusk. Not with rain, but with warning. Lightning spidered across the low clouds and thunder rolled in behind it like drums in a war march. The kind of storm that didn't just darken the skies, it changed something in the air. Michael knew it instinctively. Something was coming. He was in the kitchen finishing dinner prep when the call came. Helen's voice on the line was taut. We've got a problem. Michael stopped stirring. What kind? Child Protective Services received an anonymous report. Said you're illegally harboring minors in an unfit environment. His heart sank. Let me guess, Paul Hastings. Can't confirm, but it came with a formal request to investigate your property tonight. They'll be there within the hour. Michael turned toward the hallway. The kids are here. What do I do? You have 2 options. Let them in and risk Lena getting pulled for temporary placement again, or stall them long enough for Angela to file an emergency stay. How long do I have? Helen didn't answer for a moment. 30, maybe 40 minutes. I'll do what I can. The line went dead. Michael set down the phone and walked into the living room. The kids were sitting on the floor playing a card game with worn corners and a set of house rules that changed every few minutes. Caleb glanced up at Michael and froze. Lena saw it too. His face had that look again, that quiet fear. What is it? She asked. Michael crouched beside them. We might have visitors soon. Officials. They'll ask questions. Maybe try to take you just for the night, they'll say. Caleb's hands started shaking. Maisie leaned into Lena, already sensing the shift. Lena stood. We have to go. Michael blinked. What, we've done this before. I'll take them to the garage on Elwood Street, the one near the old train tracks. No one goes there after dark. You're not running again, Michael said. You said you'd protect us, Lena snapped, voice cracking. I meant it, he said, but not by hiding. We're done hiding. Then you better decide fast, she said, because when they come, they won't knock twice. The storm broke just as Michael bundled the kids into his truck. He knew the place Lena had mentioned, a rusted-out mechanic's garage that had been shuttered since before Caleb was born. It sat at the end of a dead-end road shielded by thick evergreens and years of abandonment. By the time they arrived, the wind was howling through the trees. Rain splattered the windshield in thick sheets, and the thunder roared closer now like it was crawling toward them. Michael helped Maisie out, first tucking her into his coat as Caleb followed behind, holding a flashlight with both hands. Lena led the way, moving with the strange confidence of someone who had done this before too many times. They slipped through a side door where the lock had long since rusted away. Inside, the smell of oil and mildew filled the air. A single hanging bulb flickered weakly above a cracked workbench. Michael turned to Lena. How did you know this place? She hesitated. Mom brought us here once, when things were bad. She said this was where Dad used to fix cars. Michael stared at her. She never said his name, Lena added. But I remember. She cried when she touched that workbench. Michael crossed the floor, slowly reaching the bench with its faded initials scratched into the wood, MG plus EM. He traced the letters with his fingertips. This had been his garage. His hands had shaped these walls, bolted. Those shelves laughed in this room with a girl who had vanished one day, taking a piece of his future with her. Lena, he said quietly, this was mine. Yours too. She blinked. You really were? Him I still am. Thunder cracked again. Louder this time. Hours passed. They sat in silence, huddled on dusty cushions, listening to the storm rage outside. Michael held Maisie in his lap. Caleb curled up beside Lena, who hadn't spoken in nearly an hour. Then suddenly, headlights. Two beams cut through the misty night, stopping just short of the garage's entrance. Michael's heart seized. But it wasn't CPS. Angela's Subaru. She burst through the door seconds later, soaked to the skin hair clinging to her face. They showed up at your house. Helen stalled them long enough for me to file the emergency stay. Judge signed it. You're safe for now. Michael exhaled relief, collapsing through his chest like a dam breaking. Lena stood slowly. So they can't take us, Angela nodded. Not tonight. Not until the full hearing. You bought yourself a few days. Caleb looked up. Can we go home? Angela smiled gently. Yes, sweetheart. You can go home. Later that night, the four of them returned to the small battered house that had become more of a home than any of them had expected. Michael helped the kids into pajamas, even brushing the knots out of Maisie's hair while she half dozed. Lena stood in the doorway, arms crossed, but softer somehow. No longer on the defensive. When Michael passed her on his way back to the kitchen, she reached out and caught his hand. Thank you, she said. Just 2 words, but they were everything. He gave a small nod, too full of feeling to speak. In the living room, Caleb had fallen asleep on the couch, a comic book sliding off his lap. Maisie was curled under a blanket, thumb in mouth. Lena was the last to turn in, but before she did, she paused beside the wooden toy truck that still sat on the shelf. Did you make this? She asked. Michael smiled faintly. With my son. She picked it up carefully, as if afraid it might fall apart. It's not perfect, she said. No, he agreed. But it's ours. She placed it back on the shelf, then turned to head to bed. The storm outside had passed. The wind had settled, and in the quiet that followed, Michael realized something. He wasn't just protecting them anymore. They were protecting him too. From solitude, from silence, from the life he thought was over. The storm had come, and somehow they'd all survived it together. Morning arrived with a rare clarity in the Oregon sky. The storm had washed the town clean. Raindrops clung to every branch, every fence post, every old nail on Michael's weathered porch, like jewels left behind by the night. Inside the house, the smell of pancakes mingled with the quiet hum of the radio. Michael moved about the kitchen with a surprising lightness. Maisie was drawing suns and stick figures at the table, Caleb building an elaborate Lego bridge, and Lena was quiet but different, more present. There was a steadiness in her now, like someone who'd been running for so long they'd forgotten what standing still felt like. Angela arrived just after 9. She stepped inside with her usual practical grace clipboard tucked under one arm, legal pad in hand, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept much since the emergency hearing. Michael poured her coffee before she even asked. "No sugar, right?" Angela gave him a tired half smile. "Right. You're learning." He nodded toward the table. "Want breakfast later? We need to talk." Michael's jaw tightened. He sat. "What is it?" Angela didn't mince words. "The state is not backing down. Paul Hastings has filed an emergency appeal to override the stay. He's pushing hard for Lena to be placed with the Eastwoods again. He's arguing that your connection to her, if any, is unverified and irrelevant because you only came forward recently. He's also using your financials against you." Michael leaned back in his chair. "So it's about money now?" "It always is," Angela replied. "But there's something else." She pulled a small envelope from her satchel. "We ran the paternity test." Michael stared at the envelope. Time seemed to suspend. "I didn't ask for this yet," he said. "I know," Angela said softly. "But if you're going to stand in court next week and claim this girl as your daughter, you need to be sure. Not just in your heart, on paper." He reached for the envelope but paused. Lena was watching from the hallway. Her eyes didn't ask the question out loud. They didn't need to, Angela noticed. "We don't have to open it now." Michael shook his head. "No. She deserves to know the truth." He tore open the envelope slowly, as if the truth might slip away if he moved too fast. Angela unfolded the paper and read silently, then looked up. "She's yours." Michael's hands gripped the table. Lena stepped into the room, barely breathing. "Really?" Angela nodded. "Legally, biologically, yes." Lena let out a single shaking laugh. "I knew it. I always kind of knew it." Michael stood slowly, unsure what to do with the tidal wave of feeling that overtook him. Joy, guilt, awe, grief, it all tangled together. "I wish I'd known," he said. "I wish I'd been there." "You're here now," Lena said, crossing the room. "That's what matters." Angela gave them a moment before continuing. "This changes everything in your favor. With the DNA results and the judge's previous ruling, the odds are better, but not guaranteed." "What else do we need?" Michael asked. "Testimonies. Support from people who've seen you raise them. Teachers, neighbors, anyone who can speak to the emotional and developmental stability they've gained since coming to you." Michael nodded. "Done. I'll ask the school. Helen. Maybe even the guy who runs the parts shop. He's seen me dragging 3 kids in for errands for weeks." Angela hesitated. "There's one more thing." She reached into her satchel again and pulled out a worn folder. Michael opened it. Inside were documents, court records, and discharge papers. It was Ellie's file. Angela spoke gently. "She passed away 2 months ago. Institutional pneumonia. The state kept it quiet because she had no listed next of kin." Michael's breath caught. "She's gone." Angela nodded. "I'm sorry." Lena looked like she'd been struck in the chest. "I thought she was getting better." Angela shook her head. "She was moved around too often. Fell through cracks no one talks about." Michael rubbed his temples. "So much of this started with her. And now you carry her legacy," Angela said. Lena whispered, "She wasn't always like that, you know. She was happy once." Michael looked at her. "So were we. Once." Angela placed a firm hand on Michael's shoulder. "You have a week to show the court what this family really means. I'll handle the law. You handle the heart." She turned to Lena. "You might be asked to speak again." "I want to," Lena said. "I'm not scared anymore." That night, Michael sat by the fire with a photo in his hands, Ellie barefoot in the summer, laughing at something just outside the frame. He'd kept it hidden in a box for years, buried with the questions she never answered. Now those answers lived under his roof, ate his food, hugged him without warning. He walked into Lena's room, knocking gently. She was journaling. "Hey," he said, holding out the photo. She took it, eyes softening. This was the camp. Yeah. We carved our initials into the bench. She used to say that tree knew all our secrets. Lena smiled faintly. She used to hum to Maisie in the middle of the night, even when she was too tired to speak. She loved you, Michael said. I know, Lena whispered. She just couldn't stay. Michael nodded. But you can. She looked at him, eyes glassy. I want to, she said. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. And in the stillness, he realized something profound. The law might need proof, but love didn't. It had already made its decision. No court could overrule that. Not now. Not ever. The morning of the final custody hearing arrived with the heavy hush of a battlefield before dawn. The house was unusually still, as if even the floorboards were holding their breath. Michael stood at the bathroom mirror, tugging the knot of his tie with fingers that didn't seem to remember how to move. He hadn't worn a suit in years, not since James's funeral, and it didn't fit quite right anymore. Nothing about this day felt right, but everything about it mattered. In the living room, Lena helped Caleb tie his shoes while Maisie twirled in her dress, humming to herself. Helen arrived right on time, holding a folder of supporting documents and a thermos of coffee. Angela was already at the courthouse preparing the case files, cross-checking her arguments. She had sent a text that morning that simply read, "No matter how today ends, you already did the most important thing. You gave them a reason to believe again." Michael glanced at the kids. Let's go remind the judge what belief looks like. The courthouse lobby was busier than usual. A few reporters lingered by the entrance. They weren't there for him, but the noise of a contested foster case involving a respected family like the Eastwoods had leaked into local press. Angela met them at the security checkpoint. You ready? She asked Michael. No, he said honestly, but we came anyway. Angela's eyes softened. That's the definition of courage. Inside the courtroom, the players took their places. Judge Wallace presided from the bench, neutral and unreadable. The courtroom was stark, no frills, no distractions, just wood silence and law. The Eastwoods sat together behind their attorney, Paul Hastings, looking every bit the part of a picture-perfect family, polished, affluent, and utterly certain. Marianne Eastwood wore pearls. John wore a red tie that practically screamed patriotic integrity. Michael sat beside Angela, Lena at his side. Caleb and Maisie were escorted to a private room with a child advocate who would speak on their behalf later. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Wallace's gavel tapped once. We are here to determine custodial placement for minors, Lena Caleb and Maisie Mercer. Counsel proceed. Paul Hastings stood. Your Honor, the Eastwoods are not merely offering a roof, they are offering opportunity. They can provide the kind of stability, education, and psychological support that Mr. Gray cannot. This is not about love or sentiment. It's about what's best for the children's long-term development. Angela rose slowly, her voice clear and calm. And yet she said when these children were abandoned, when they were frightened, malnourished, and overlooked by the system, it was not an institution that comforted them. It was not a clinical setting or a curated household. It was Michael Gray. She turned toward Michael. This man did not take them in for a reward. He did not seek attention. He fed them, protected them, listened to them, and most importantly, he stayed. She handed a packet to the clerk. In this folder are letters from the children's teachers, their pediatrician, 2 neighbors, and Helen Walker from DHS. All attest to the emotional and educational progress these children have made since entering Mr. Gray's care. She paused, letting it sink in, and included in the evidence is a certified DNA test proving that Mr. Gray is Lena Mercer's biological father. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Paul Hastings stiffened visibly. Judge Wallace lifted the page, eyebrows raised. That is significant. Paul stood quickly. We were not given time to review. This is a custody hearing, not a criminal trial, Angela said smoothly. Truth doesn't wait for your convenience. The judge tapped his pen once. Ms. Mercer, would you like to speak? Lena stood. Her dress was simple. Her voice wasn't. Your Honor, I've lived in 6 houses in 2 years. Each one said they'd take care of me. Most didn't remember my name after week 1. Some forgot to feed us. Some forgot to listen. She looked at Michael. He never forgot anything. Lena stepped closer to the bench, small but unshaking. I didn't know who he was when we first met, but I knew how he made me feel safe. seen. Like I wasn't just a problem to be fixed. She took a deep breath. I don't need perfect. I need home. And he is that. So are Caleb and Maisie. We're not asking you to give us a future. We're asking you not to take away the one we already have. Judge Wallace looked down for a long moment, then spoke. This court will take a short recess. A decision will follow shortly. The gavel fell again. They waited in silence in the hallway, the kids fidgeting, Helen pacing Angela, reviewing notes she didn't need to see again. Michael sat beside Lena, his hand resting on hers. I'm proud of you, he said. No matter what happens. She leaned into him. I know. 30 minutes passed before the bailiff returned. Judge Wallace is ready. Everyone filed back into the courtroom. This time there was no preamble. Judge Wallace looked over his reading glasses. Custody law is meant to serve the child, not the adult, not the narrative. The question before me today is not who has more money, more degrees, or a larger home. He looked at Michael, then at Lena. It's who gives these children the greatest chance to be loved, to be safe, to grow into whole people. He paused. Effective immediately, Michael Gray is awarded full legal guardianship of Lena Mercer, with expedited adoption proceedings for Caleb and Maisie Mercer, pending final paperwork. Angela's hand closed around Michael's wrist. The gavel came down. It was done. Outside the courthouse, the clouds parted. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough for a shaft of golden light to break through, glinting off the hood of Michael's truck. He knelt before Lena, who threw her arms around his neck so fast he nearly fell back. Caleb clung to his side and Maisie wrapped herself around his leg like a vine. He looked at all three of them. You're stuck with me now, he said. Maisie squealed. Forever and ever. Michael smiled, tears in his eyes. Yes, baby girl. Forever and ever. And for the first time in years, he believed it. The news spread through the neighborhood faster than any official letter ever could. By the next morning, Michael's front porch was crowded with small gestures of love, a fresh pie from Mrs. Whitmore next door, a welcome card scribbled in crayon from the twins across the street, and a stack of donated books from the local elementary librarian. It was as if the town itself had exhaled with him. Inside, the house felt different. Not because of any furniture moved or walls painted, but because of something more invisible, something deep. The silence that had once haunted Michael's home had been replaced by the sounds of family footsteps on old stairs, laughter, spilling through hallways, the occasional shout of, "That's not fair," over board games. This wasn't just shelter anymore. It was theirs. 2 weeks had passed since the judge's gavel came down, sealing what Michael already knew in his heart. Legal custody was just ink on paper, but now it meant doors opening, new schools, pediatric care, state support. And it meant structure, stability, permanence. Angela stopped by on a Friday afternoon. She stood on the porch, her blazer, a little wrinkled, a coffee in her hand, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. I brought paperwork, she said, holding up a manila folder, and cookies. The cookies are the real reason I came. Michael grinned and stepped aside. Come in before the kids find them first. Lena appeared almost instantly in the kitchen. Is that Angela? Angela turned. Yes, and I come bearing legal news. Lena wiped her hands on a dish towel. Do I have to testify again? Not this time, Angela said. Today I'm just the bearer of good tidings. She placed the folder on the table and opened it. The adoption petitions for Caleb and Maisie have been expedited. You'll sign here, and initial here. She pointed with her pen. There's still a home inspection and post-placement visits, but barring any catastrophe, it's all but finalized. Michael stared at the documents. His name at the top, their names below. I get to be their legal dad, Angela smiled. You already are. Lena leaned over and looked. So, we're really not going anywhere, no, Michael said softly. You're home. That night, Helen dropped by with balloons and a homemade dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, because growing kids need real food, she insisted. After the dishes were cleared, they all sat outside under the soft glow of porch lights. Lena curled up in one of the wicker chairs, Maisie nestled in Michael's lap, and Caleb rested quietly by his side. Helen sipped her tea. Do you know how rare this is? Michael looked at her. What happy endings, she said. I've worked with dozens of families over the years. Some win cases, some lose, but very few heal. What I see here, it's healing. Angela nodded. I've spent my career fighting for kids who don't even know what to ask for. But these three, they asked. They hoped. And you? She looked at Michael. You listened. Michael felt something shift in his chest, a strange warmth that had nothing to do with the tea in his hand. You know, he said quietly, for the longest time, I thought my life ended when I lost my son. I thought that was the final chapter, but it wasn't. I just didn't know the story had more to say. Angela raised her glass of lemonade. To rewriting the ending. They all clinked glasses, laughter floating into the night air. The next morning, Lena woke up early. She found Michael on the back steps sipping coffee and watching the horizon. The sky was painted in streaks of pink and gold, the kind of soft dawn that whispered promises instead of shouting them. She sat beside him. I'm thinking of writing something, she said. He looked over. Yeah, for school. A personal essay contest. Theme is, what family means to me. He raised an eyebrow. You'll win that one. She smiled faintly. Not if I make people cry too hard. Michael chuckled. Maybe that's exactly why you'll win. She was quiet for a long moment. Then I'm glad I knocked over those flour sacks. He looked puzzled for a second, then remembered. That first night, the storage room, the stolen bread. I'm glad too, he said. Lena tilted her head at him. You think Mom knew what she was doing? Leaving us like that? Michael stared out at the sky. I think she was trying to protect you the only way she could. I think she was broken, but not heartless. Lena nodded slowly. I wish she could see this. She does, Michael said. That evening, Lena sat at the kitchen table writing her essay. Caleb read a book on the couch, and Maisie drew a picture of the family with big hearts above each head. Michael cleaned up dinner, humming softly, a tune he hadn't whistled since James was alive. It floated through the air like memory, quiet, unassuming, full of echoes. Lena paused mid-sentence and looked up. Mike, yeah. Can I start calling you Dad? The plate slipped slightly in his hand. He caught it. He turned, and the look on his face was pure disbelief, followed by something raw and real, and so deep it stunned him into stillness. I'd love that, he whispered. She smiled and went back to writing. Michael walked into the hallway and sat down slowly on the bottom step. He buried his face in his hands and let the tears come, not from grief, not from regret, from grace, from a future he thought he'd lost. Because sometimes family doesn't come the way you expect. Sometimes it arrives in the form of 3 children with nowhere left to run. Sometimes it finds you when you think there's nothing left to give. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to be the man who says yes when the world tells them no. He stood, wiped his eyes, and walked back into the kitchen. His children were waiting. Spring came slowly to their small corner of Oregon. The last frost melted into soft earth tulips, peeked out beside the sagging picket fence, and the creaky swings at the town park finally saw regular visitors again. Life, after a long season of waiting, was beginning to bloom. So was the Gray household. There were now 4 toothbrushes by the bathroom sink, a rotating chore chart pinned to the fridge, and a cardboard box labeled Lena's Future Novels beneath the bookshelf in the living room. The walls bore new fingerprints, the pantry was constantly half empty, and the old washing machine ran nearly every day, but the house felt fuller, lighter, and utterly alive. Michael stood at the kitchen counter, folding lunch napkins into triangles, because Maisie insisted they tasted better that way. Across the room, Caleb methodically packed his backpack, organizing each folder like a soldier preparing for a mission. Lena sat at the table with her laptop, open eyes bright, as she typed, her fingers flying faster than ever before. Still working on your essay? Michael asked. She nodded without looking up. Final revision. I want to submit it before noon. What's the prize again? Statewide recognition, scholarship money, and a trip to Salem to read it aloud if I win. Michael grinned. Well, you better practice your stage voice. Sounds like they're going to need a microphone big enough to hold all your truth. Lena gave a small, knowing smile. Maybe. Michael poured coffee into his favorite chipped mug, black with bold white letters that read, Best Dad Ever, a gift from all 3 kids on his birthday just 2 weeks prior. Lena had found it at the thrift store and filled it with little notes from each of them. He kept them in his drawer now. On the mornings when old ghosts crept in, he read them. They chased the shadows away. By afternoon, the school auditorium buzzed with soft conversation, the rustle of programs, and the excited chatter of parents and students. The essay contest had drawn entries from all over the state. 10 finalists had been chosen. Lena Mercer was one of them. Michael sat in the third-row tie, slightly crooked boots polished as best he could. Caleb sat beside him in a shirt that didn't match his pants, but no one minded. Maisie had her head on Michael's shoulder, quietly humming her favorite song about elephants. Angela and Helen were both there too, seated nearby Angela with her arms crossed in proud silence, Helen wiping at her eyes before anything had even begun. When Lena's name was called, she stepped up to the podium, hair tied back, voice steady. Her essay was titled, "The House That Found Me." She began, "I used to think family was something you were born into, something fixed, like eye color or the town on your birth certificate. But I was wrong. Family is not made by blood. It's made by choice, by small acts of kindness, a bowl of soup, a place to sleep. A man who doesn't ask where you've been, but asks if you're warm enough now. The first time I called him Dad, he cried when he thought I wasn't looking. But I saw him, just like he saw me when no one else did. My brother Caleb is still quiet, but when he laughs, it shakes the room. My sister Maisie thinks I'm a queen, and I don't plan on telling her otherwise. And me, I'm still learning what it means to trust the world again. But I have a home now, not just a roof, a home. This house found me when I was lost. This man took us in when we had nothing. And now we have everything that matters." She paused, then ended simply. "Family is not where you come from. It's where someone decides you belong. I found mine." The applause rose slowly at first, then swelled like a tide, crashing gently through the room. Michael stood clapping harder than anyone, his vision blurred. And he wasn't the only one. Weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. Lena had won first place. Her essay would be printed in local newspapers and education journals. A small scholarship fund would be established in her name to support other foster youth pursuing writing. Angela framed a copy for their hallway. Helen brought flowers. Michael bought takeout for dinner and declared it Lena Day. Later that evening, they sat on the porch watching the sun melt into the horizon. Caleb leaned against Michael's side, half asleep. Maisie lay stretched across a picnic blanket with a juice box in one hand and a popsicle in the other. Lena sat beside Michael, her legs crossed the golden light, casting her in soft brilliance. "You ever think," she asked, "about what would have happened if you'd turned us in that first night?" Michael sipped his coffee. "Every day." She tilted her head, and he looked at her, really looked, and smiled. "I thank God I didn't." The wind moved gently through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime sang. No big endings, no dramatic music. Just life. Soft, real steady. "I don't think this is the end of the story," Lena said. Michael raised a brow. No, she said. "I think it's just the beginning." He nodded, the truth of that sinking into his bones. Because stories don't always start with birth or end with blood. Sometimes they begin in the middle of a grocery store, or a storm, or a broken heart. And sometimes they find their ending not in a courtroom but around a dinner table filled with laughter light and the stubborn, beautiful echo of love. Some homes are built with bricks. Others are built with grace, second chances, and a single life-changing yes. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Whether you're from a small town or a big city, your presence here means a lot to us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring emotional stories just like this one. Every like, comment, and share helps us continue creating content that brings light and hope into people's lives. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of a simple act of love.